Booker meets up with Andy on the street of Morocco to tell her about a possible job they have of rescuing hostages in South Sudan, and he tells her that James Copley wants them to do it. He is a former member of the CIA and is freelancing these kinds of jobs now, but Andy doesn't want to. She's convinced the world isn't worth saving anymore, but Booker convinces her to at least come and talk with Nikki and Joe about it, and at the hotel, they all greet each other warmly. They haven't seen each other in a long time, and the rest of the crew seems willing to take the job. Andy is still hesitant because she doesn't trust Copley, but they convince her to go with Booker and have a meeting with him just to see what he has to say, and she agrees. While Andy and Booker sit at an outside table near a cafe, Nikki and Joe watch from the hotel window. They are keeping surveillance to make sure nothing goes wrong, and Copley explains the situation, how they could help make a difference, and Andy is reluctant but takes the job. She asks Copley why he left the CIA, and he tells her that he decided to take a break when his wife got sick. But when she died, he couldn't bring himself to go back, and the crew takes a helicopter. They travel to South Sudan where they stake out the hostage situation. Once night falls, they silently execute the guards and make their way inside the bunker. Once in the bunker, they realize that there are no hostages and there are cameras on the ceiling. Andy realizes they've been set up as dozens of military personnel enter the room and start shooting at them. They fall to the ground, blood pooling around them, and the soldiers turn their backs. They think they're dead, but their bodies start to rapidly heal and expel the bullets. They get up from the ground and kill the soldiers, and all of this witnessed by Copley. They bury their bloody clothes in the sand and hop on a train inside, and they discuss their options. Andy says that they have to find Copley and kill him since he has evidence of them coming back to life. In Afghanistan, Niles is a soldier in the American forces, and she is sent on a job. It is to check on a group of women that they think might be being held hostage by an enemy. When she confronts the women, they silently point her in the direction of the man. She enters the building to kill him, she shoots him in the chest, and goes to check on the body. The dying man slices her throat, and her friend holds her while she dies. On the train, the crew has dreams of Niles being killed, and in the medic tent in Afghanistan. Niles has dreams of the crew on the train, and the crew realizes what the dreams mean. There's another one of them, and this frustrates Andy because she wanted to go into hiding. After she was done tying things off with Copley, and the rest of the crew convince her that they need to find Niles to take her in. She says she'll go do it herself, and she'll meet them in Paris and tasks them with tracking Copley. Niles realizes her friends are all wary of her when they come to check on her. This is because she doesn't even have a scar from the injury, and the incident is reported, and Niles is told that she will be sent to Germany for more testing, and she goes to her tent. She finds that her friends have already packed up her things. In England, Merrick gives a presentation to hundreds of possible donors for stem cell research. He has the technology to figure out how to end human disease and prolong the human lifespan. All he needs is investment. Afterwards, Merrick meets with Copley and some of his team. Copley shows him the footage of Andy and her crew and how they were able to come back to life. But Merrick is unsatisfied, and he says he needs hard evidence because people would not believe him. They will think video is fake, and he wants Copley to capture them and bring them to him. While Niles waits for a helicopter to pick her up to take her to Germany, Andy interferes. She kidnaps her, and she wakes up in the trunk of an army vehicle that Andy is driving. She immediately tries to escape, and she kicks out the back and falls to the ground. Andy stops driving to get her, and Niles tries to run away. Andy shoots her in the back of the head. She waits for Niles to come back to life and tells her that if she wants answers, she'll get in the car. Andy and Niles take a plane participating in drug trafficking to Paris, but Niles seems unsatisfied from the answers Andy has given her, and after Andy goes to sleep, Niles binds her to her chair. She holds a gun to the pilot's head and tells him to turn the plane around, and Andy wakes up. She tells the pilot to play dead in Russian so she can distract Niles, and the pilot returns to flying. He turns the plane to Paris while Niles and Andy fight, and Andy wins and is able to calm Niles down and convinces her enough to get her on board with going to Paris. And once they land in Paris, they meet up with the rest of the crew in an old abandoned church and have dinner. They get to know each other, and Booker reveals that he became immortal in the 18th century. Nikki and Joe met at the Crusades in the 12th century as enemies, and Andy says that she is the oldest, but doesn't remember how old she actually is, and they all go to bed, except Andy. She sits in the living room, and in midnight, Niles has a nightmare that wakes up everyone. She explains that she dreamt of a woman locked in an iron coffin drowning in the middle of the sea. The crew explains to her that she saw Gwen, an immortal woman that used to fight alongside Andy. When they were attempting to free women accused of witchcraft, they were caught and accused of witchcraft themselves, and when the town realized they couldn't die, it just confirmed their suspicions, and they set to work trying to figure out how to get rid of them. Eventually, they separated the women and locked Gwen in an iron coffin and tossed it into the ocean. Inside, she drowns over and over, reviving only to die again for eternity and reveal that they can die. But it is very rare, and they explain that eventually, after an immortal has been alive for long enough, their wounds just stop healing, meaning it is their time, and Andy and Niles talk outside about their loved ones and the people they have to leave behind in order to live their new lives. While they talk, they hear soldiers outside the church, and they realize Copley has found them. Andy takes care of the soldiers as Copley watches from a surveillance van nearby. They re-enter the church. Joe and Nikki are nowhere in sight, and Booker has been blown up by a grenade. It takes him a while to heal, and Niles waits with Booker while Andy kills the rest of the soldiers. When she returns, they pack up their things and make their way to another hideout. Joe and Nikki wake up in a van surrounded by soldiers, and the soldiers tease them for being gay. They restrain them when they try to embrace, and the van arrives to meet Copley in England. The back of the van is open to reveal that Joe and Nikki have killed everyone inside. They were still handcuffed and are escorted to Merrick, who explains that he intends to use them for stem cell research and will conduct experiments on them until he figures out how to lengthen the human lifespan. He makes it clear that he doesn't care what he has to do to them or how much pain they're in. He just wants results, and Nikki and Joe are taken away to a lab, and Merrick demands Copley to bring him Andy and Booker. Andy, Booker, and Niles take shelter in an abandoned mine, and Andy realizes that she's still bleeding from the fight at the church and isn't healing on her own, and she discreetly steps out. Booker tells Niles about how hard it is to watch all of their loved ones die, especially when they don't believe them when they say that can't help, and Andy drives to a pharmacy. She purchases medical supplies, and the cashier offers to help dress her wounds in the back room. When Andy asks why the woman is helping her, especially without asking any questions, the woman says that she expects Andy to pass on the act of kindness to someone else tomorrow. When Andy returns to the car, she attempts to come to terms with the fact that she is no longer immortal. Joe and Nikki are strapped down to medical chairs in Merrick's lab, and Copley tries to tell Merrick that he has all the samples he could ever need, and he doesn't need to hold them hostage anymore. Merrick says he'll do whatever he wants with Joe and Nikki, and he won't stop until he has results. Nikki tells the nurse that they aren't going to be able to produce any results since all of this has already happened before in the past with the same justification of helping people. But it's never worked, and Nile wakes up from a bad dream in the middle of the night. She goes outside and she finds Andy going through her phone, and they talk about family, the pain of being immortal, and Booker meets with them to say he's found a possible location where Copley might be, and they head that way and pull up outside the fence surrounding the building. They start preparing to enter, and Andy instructs Booker to scout ahead, but Niles refuses to go. She says she can't live with killing people, and she wants to spend as much time with her family as she can before it's too late. Andy lets her take the car and the guns and points her in the direction of a train. She enters the building with Booker, and they find Copley in a room upstairs. She holds him at gunpoint. Suddenly, Booker shoots her on the side and restrains her and explains that he set them up. He brought everyone to Copley and Merrick because he hopes that Merrick can figure out a solution, a way for them to die, and only then Booker realizes Andy isn't healing and panics. Guards come in and restrain Andy and Booker, and Copley protests. He says that he doesn't think Andy will survive the tests they're about to put her through. Merrick doesn't care, and the guards take them away, and Merrick takes Andy and Booker to the room. Joe and Nikki are restrained in the same testing hall, and Copley argues to Merrick. He says if Andy is no longer immortal, then testing will be murder, and he will not support it. Merrick kicks him out and sets to work trying to keep Andy alive so they can run tests on her. Niles returns to Merrick's headquarters, where Copley explains that he kept an eye on their crew, all their contributions to mankind, and he says that he believed that taking them in and doing this testing he would be helping the world, but realizes he was wrong. They would do better for the world if they had just left them alone. Niles gets Copley to take her to Merrick's location, and Copley provides her an access code. Niles passes past the building's little army, and the soldiers inform Merrick that Niles is immortal. She finds where they're being kept and frees them, and Nikki and Joe are furious with Booker for betraying them, and Andy doesn't want to fight anymore and convinces Joe and Nikki to stop. She says now isn't the time to argue about this, and Niles convinces Andy to keep fighting. Niles provides them all with weapons, and they move through the building to try and find and kill Merrick. They all do their best to cover Andy, but she quickly proves that she's still just as capable, even though she's no longer immortal, and they get to Merrick's office to find he isn't there. They see the elevator going down. Nikki and Joe go to chase after Merrick, while Niles stays with Andy. The elevator going down was a ploy, and Merrick shows up pointing a gun at Andy. Niles and Andy reenact the trick Andy played on her in the plane, and Andy pretends to play dead. They distract Merrick long enough for Niles to tackle him. They break through the window. They tumble several stories before landing on a car, killing them both, and Nikki and Joe check on Niles. They help her out of the car, and Andy meets up with them, and they leave Merrick's body and drive away. Later, they have lunch, and Booker waits outside while the rest of the crew decides his punishment for betraying them, and Niles goes outside to comfort him, and he invites her to the team. They chat on the beach, and others say his punishment will be spending 100 years by himself. Since Andy is mortal, it means they will never see each other again. The group then confronts Copley to destroy any evidence of them being immortal. They also ask him for his help in fixing the world, and Copley agrees to help them and joins them. Later, Booker goes back to his house and sees Gwen waiting for him. She is alive and escaped the coffin.